At this station, we are going to be going over the PowerPoint for today. So if you do not have your notebook open, go ahead and open up your notebook. We're writing the date, the topic, and the page numbers in our table of contents. And go ahead and make a new page with the word conclusions real big at the top. You know what to do at this station. Just follow along like this is Mr. Walker leading and this is a normal PowerPoint day. And we're just filling out our notebooks. But if you need more time, feel free to pause this video and have more time. Okay, but we're moving on. But if you don't have the date, the topic, the conclusion, and a new page for conclusion, do that now. Pause. So what are the steps to an experiment? Let's review real quick. What is the first step to any experiment? You should know this by now. It's observations. What comes after observations? Scientific question. Good. What comes after scientific question? Inference. And then we have hypothesis. And then what comes after hypothesis? Procedure. What comes after procedure? Data collection. Data collection, and then we have data analysis, and then after data analysis we have our conclusion. So this is the end of the experiment, this is the conclusion to the experiment. That's what we're covering today. What is a conclusion? Do you remember what a conclusion is in ELA? We might have talked about it earlier in class. What's a conclusion in ELA? So a conclusion is the end of a process like writing an essay or doing an experiment. So writing an essay in ELA, the conclusion would just be the end. Maybe it's the end paragraph, maybe it's the end sentence, but the conclusion wraps up everything in a nice, neat little bow because it's the end. And you want people to really know that it's the end and to know what happened. So the same thing with an experiment. It's the end of the experiment. You wrap it up in a nice, neat bow, and people know that it's the end of the process. Write this definition down in your notebook. Make sure you have the word conclusion underlined because it is a vocabulary word. If you need more time to write down this definition, please pause this video and take more time. Okay, conclusions in science. A conclusion in science is usually in a paragraph form, but we're going to practice without a paragraph in these first few months of doing experiments. Do you remember claim, evidence, reason from ELA? Or maybe you have race now. Restate, answer, cite, explain. Maybe that's what you have, race. But claim, evidence, reason is also from ELA. So let's go over the similarities in science. So we have restate the question. We have our scientific question. When in ELA you would restate the question that the person asked you. In science we already have a question that we answered ourselves or asked ourselves. We have our scientific question. So we're going to restate the scientific question in science. Then we're going to move on to our old claim. This is where it gets a little different from ELA, where maybe you restate the question in ELA and then you answer the question with a claim. We are going to restate the question and answer the question with our hypothesis, right? So our old claim is the old hypothesis, and if we need one, we can make a new claim or a new hypothesis that answers the same question. Then we're going to move on to our evidence. What does the data say? We're going to go over what our data was and the numbers that support or don't support our hypothesis. Then we're going to move on to our reasoning, which is kind of the same as ELA. Why was our old hypothesis wrong or right? And why is the new hypothesis better? If we have a new hypothesis, we're going to explain why we have that new hypothesis. What was wrong with our old hypothesis? Why couldn't we keep our old hypothesis or our old claim? Then this is where it gets really different from ELA. We are mentioning possible errors. What went wrong in the experiment? What can we do better for next time? And then we're going to move on to possible next experiments. In ELA, you do not have possible next experiments because you're not doing experiments necessarily in ELA. So what can you do next? And these are related experiments. It's not just random experiments that you want to do next in science class. It's what experiments can we do to make our data a lot better. All right, let's write this down. So the order here is first, and this isn't necessarily one sentence. Sometimes it's a few sentences. Mr. Waka put that the first sentence should be the scientific question, but that's not necessarily going to be your first sentence, but it's the first thing, right? So let's write this down. First, we have our scientific question. Second, we have our claim, our old hypothesis. Third, our new hypothesis. Fourth, our evidence or our data. Fifth is reasoning. Sixth is possible errors. And seventh is possible next experiments. Write this down in your notebook. And if you need more time, which you probably do, pause this experiment, or pause this video and continue writing, because that was not nearly enough time to finish writing all of this. So pause the video and finish. But I'm going to move on. Oh, well, that's the end of the presentation. So if you have additional time right now, turn and review the similarities and differences of conclusions in science and conclusions in ELA with your partner right now. I'm going to exit.